Mike and probably Ronnie, our OWCP person. We're going to talk about the EFEL, the Emergency Federal Employee Leave, and the stipulations or what you have to do to qualify or to successfully claim leave under this act. You know, this pretty much like the last bill is a law. It supersedes the little contract that we have with the Postal Service. And of course, the Postal Service, in implementing the provisions of this bill, what's going on? No, we're like into no, you guys just a little lower. That's all. So with that, there's some provisions. The leave is still available. We've heard rumors about a lot of managers or supervisors or postmasters, Mike. They're telling people now that the post office, that the government has run out of money, that the leave is not available, that you're going to have to pay this money back, and all sorts of misinformation that's being shared with our members. So Mike is going to really go into the weeds on this thing and talk about specifically some do's and don'ts, what the law means, what it don't means, what you have to do if you're having problems. Of course, Branch 11 members, people call, they ask about, hey, they ask for this documentation, ask for that documentation. I tell you to call Ronnie Morgan. Because he actually walk you through it and go through the paperwork. Now I got to commend our members. If one thing they noticed right off the bat, Mike, is when the Postal Service first put out the paperwork that you had to fill out these documents to take the leave. I believe they began this last week. A lot of the members say, hey, it did not have a PS form on it. This is bogus. They made this up. That's a good catch because this documentation don't have a PS form number on it. Any other time we tell you it's BS, you don't have to sign it. But no, this is documentation that is needed to use the leave. And so Mike and Ronnie is going to go deep into that right now. So I'm going to turn this over without any further ado to our business agent, Mike Cariff, and let him explain to you the ins and outs of this provision. If you need to use the mouse. Okay. Sir. Good evening, everyone. Got a few people here in the hall still, but most of the people I would assume are on via Zoom. Are we ready to start, or are we still getting people in, Ronnie?
No one in the waiting room.
Okay.
Let's let them know.
Well, if you expecting someone to get on and you don't see them on yet, you might want to let them know we're going to go ahead and get started. Although it's not 8:30 yet, we do anticipate that the people that want to get on have already gotten on, and we can go ahead and get started. So we have here myself, Michael Cariff. I'm the National Business Agent for the NALC in Region 3, which covers the state of Illinois. I have with me Mr. Ronnie Morgan. He is OWCP rep for Branch 11, Chicago. He's also SME, subject matter expert on the EFEL. He could get up here and definitely make this presentation, but tonight we are coordinating our activities, and he's working with me to put things up on the screen as we talk about them, so that you can see and kind of interact with all of the information and hopefully absorb and understand everything that's going on here. What we're going to do, I need to move this mouse out of the way before I start clicking on something. What we're going to do tonight is I'm going to present the EFEL and how it started and the law, and then go through all the paperwork and everything. And then
we'll open it up for questions so that we can go over all the different scenarios and hopefully help you guys out with any questions you have, whether it pertains to you yourself or a coworker, whether you're a union steward or whatever. So hopefully that format will work out. And if there's any, problems or questions, just let us know. You can post information in the chat or questions. We may not get to those questions right away because we're going to go through the whole presentation first, but we'll look at the questions and we can respond to them. And then you can also raise your hand. If you know how to do that through the Zoom platform, you raise your hand and then you can be unmuted. You can be called upon to speak, and we'll go like that. So with that, Ronnie is I was going to introduce Tony Hudson, Regional Administrative Assistant, Bill Jackson, Regional Administrative Assistant. I don't know if you guys even know what these people look like. With the pandemic, we've lost touch with everybody. So are they on the call? If they're on, then we can put them up on the screen for a second so you know who they are. Margaret Parker, our Regional Grievance Assistant, should be here as well. There's Tony. Hi, Tony. We got Bill and Margaret or no?
No bill.
No, Bill, what? All right. Well, moving right along. Hey, I introduced everyone out of the office that's here, so I did my job. All right. Let's go back to the beginning and start with the law. The law was passed on March 11th, 2021. It was passed as an appropriations bill. The appropriations bill was House Resolution 1319, I believe, ended up being enacted into law under Section 4001, the Emergency Federal Employee Leave Fund. There is established in the Treasury the Emergency Federal Employee Leave Fund to be administered by OPM, Office of Personnel Management, for the purposes set forth in subsection B. And then we'll get to subsection B. $570 million, which shall be deposited into the fund and remain available through September 30th of 2022. So from March 11th or March 12th until September 30th of this year. No, it says 2022. Is that a typo? Should be 2021.
It's saying that they're going to be paying out of that fund up until next year.
Oh, wow.
I think they expect a staggering.
Okay, the availability. So I guess the fund is established until 2022. Sorry, I'm just reading this at this time. At the bottom there, it does say that under period of availability, that the act will, provided to and used by an employee during the period beginning on the date of enactment of this act and ending on September 30th, 2021. So I don't think that's a typo. It just, the first part refers to the fund. Anyway, under B, the purpose of the fund. The fund shall be available for reimbursement to an agency for the use of paid leave under this section by any employee of the agency who is unable to work because the employee is. And then you have the 8 reasons. So the law established the 8 reasons under which you can use the fund. Number 1, is subject to a federal, state, or local quarantine or isolation order related to COVID-19, okay? Number 2, has been advised by a healthcare provider to self-quarantine due to concerns related to COVID-19. Number 3, is caring for an individual who is subject to such an order or has been so advised. That's number 3. Number 4 is experiencing symptoms of COVID-19 and seeking a medical diagnosis. Number 5, a little bit complicated, is caring for a son or daughter of such employee if the school or place of care of the son or daughter has been closed, comma, if the school or such if the school of such son or daughter requires or makes optional a virtual learning instruction model, or requires or makes optional a hybrid of in-person and virtual learning instruction models, or the child care provider of such son or daughter is unavailable due to COVID-19 precautions. Everything's going to come back to COVID-19. Number 6 is experiencing any other substantially similar condition. Number 6 has never been identified and is not in use. Number 7 is caring for a family member with a mental or physical disability or who is 55 years of age or older and incapable of self-care without regard to whether another individual other than the employee is available to care for such family member if the place of care for such family member is closed or the direct care provider is unavailable due to COVID-19. You guys knew that. Number 8, final 8, is obtaining immunization related to COVID-19 or is recovering from any injury, disability, illness, or condition related to such immunization. Okay? Then it gets into, we're still in the law, under number 2, the total amount that you can use is not to exceed 600 hours of paid leave for each full-time employee and a proportional equivalent of 600 hours for a part-time employee, CCAs, etc. Under B, shall be paid at the same hourly rate as other leave payments, unlike the FFCRA, which had a portion that paid at the 2/3 rate. This leave amount up to 600 hours paid at 100% of your, paid at the same rate as annual leave or sick leave, any same rate of pay that you normally get. And then number 4, under the law, a little bit of monkey wrench thrown into this thing, calculation of retirement benefit. Any paid leave provided to an employee under this section shall reduce the total service used to calculate any federal civilian retirement benefit. We'll get back to that later. Employee is defined under 4D2 as an individual employed by the Postal Service. No limitation whatsoever on the type of employee, how long you've been employed, etc. Okay? All right, so that's the law. That law was enacted March the 11th, and immediately as a response to that, the Postal Service put out notice that postal employees, including letter carriers that want to use the leave, would have the ability to do so. And they put out a letter, a series of letters, 4 letters. Oh, they put out the stand-up talk that's up on the screen, I'm sorry. And the stand-up talk made people aware of their eligibility to use the leave and what the 8 reasons there were. Following the stand-up talk, they put out these series of letters authored by Doug Tolino, who was Chief Human Resources Officer, still is. He's also now the Deputy Postmaster General as of, I think, yesterday, but still has his title as the Chief Human Resources Officer. He put out the letters that were addressed to officers, but addressed to all the postal employees. And those letters were dated March 18th, March 30th, April 14th, and April 29th. And those letters indicated that under the interim process, employees may submit requests to use EFEL. However, supervisors and managers are only authorized to conditionally approve such leave requests. Goes on to say that you should advise the employees that additional requirements, including but not limited to producing appropriate documentation to support their need for leave, are likely to be imposed once we receive official guidance from OPM. Employees approved for leave on the basis of the EFEL qualifying reasons prior to the Postal Service implementation of OPM's official guidance must comply with any such additional requirements to prevent their leave from being converted to a type of the employee's postal leave or leave without pay as appropriate. So the Postal Service let everyone know that they were aware of the law. They were waiting on guidance from OPM, who administers the fund that was set aside by the law. And in the interim, they would approve your leave conditionally. However, once they got guidance from OPM on what type of documents will be required to approve the leave, that you'd have to provide those documents. And if you don't, then the leave would be taken away from you that was conditionally approved up until the time we got guidance from OPM. Hope that is understood. So guidance from OPM didn't come until April the 29th, more than 6 weeks after the law was enacted. And when it came out, it was a lot. OPM put out a series of documents, including this kind of cover letter here. And the cover letter indicates that there were 5 attachments that went along with the guidance that they put out. So April the 29th, you had a summary of key features. You have guidance on COVID-19, nice 20-page document there that I've read for you, so you don't have to. Number 3 attachment is the employee notification and leave request form. Number 4 attachment is the thing you got to sign, the template for the employee agreement in connection with EPL. By the way, OPM calls it EPL, emergency paid leave. The law referred to emergency federal employee leave. It's used interchangeably, those 2 terms. And then number 5 was a Q&A that OPM put out. And so you have the cover letter along with the 5 attachments. They came out on April the 29th. I want to draw your attention to some of the things that OPM put out, but we won't cover much of it. Well, some of it we will cover, because then we're going to get into the post office documents that they put out as a response to OPM's guidance. And those will be more relevant, I think, to what we're talking about tonight. But under the key features, general information, I want to draw your attention to the responsibility of the agencies. So OPM is the, umbrella organization governing the federal agencies. The Postal Service is one of the agencies. The responsibility of the agencies is as follows. You can see up on the screen that 1, you inform the employees of the EPL, you process their request, etc. If you go down to the 6th bullet point there, it says submit certified reimbursement claims to OPM. And there's where we have some concern with the Postal Service, and I'll talk about that in a minute. But just keep in mind that that was in the guidance from OPM as well. All right, let's go into attachment number 3. Attachment number 3 is the form that Mac was alluding to at the beginning, the form that you're going to have to fill out in conjunction with any request to use the emergency federal employee leave. This form tells you that you will identify the reason for the use of the leave. You check the box there, 1 through 8, whatever the reason is why you're using the leave. And then you have to certify the following. There's 4 certifications that you have to do. 1, I attest that I will be using EPL to be excused from duty only during hours when I am unable to work because an EPL qualifying circumstance applies to me. 2, I understand that any EPL provided to me will reduce my total creditable service used to calculate any federal civilian retirement annuity benefit I may receive. And that would apply to the FERS annuity that we're entitled to, not the TSP. Number 3, I attest that I have signed the EPL employee agreement and understand that the granting of EPL is conditional upon the availability of monies in the EPL fund, and that I will be obligated to take action as described in the EPL employee agreement to resolve any overpayment debt that if conditional EPL is canceled due to fund exhaustion. And we'll get into that form in 1 minute here. The 4th thing you have to certify, I hereby certify that all statements made in the application are true, made in this application are true and correct to the best of my knowledge and belief. I understand that a false or misleading certification may be grounds for disciplinary action up to and including removal. Then the 2nd page of the form will list all of the reasons. So you would put a check mark next to the reason that you're gonna, the reason why you're off work. And then the nature of the documentation that's required is then listed there. I'll make a couple of comments here. Generally, number one is not in use because the fact that local laws are not applicable to postal workers. Number one is generally not in use. There's one minor exception that we may get into later, but for the most part, number one is not in use. Number 6 is definitely not in use because there hasn't been any further direction from OPM on that. So 1 and 6 pretty much not going to be in use. The rest of them will be, particularly numbers 5 and 8 are probably be the most used ones. 5 dealing with the son or daughter in school, e-learning or virtual or hybrid form of school. And then number 8 is to get the immunization or side effects as a result of getting the immunization. Number 4, which is experiencing symptoms of COVID-19 and actively seeking a medical diagnosis, does not require any additional documentation. Number 8, getting the immunization or side effects from the immunization does not require the way they word it here, no generally required additional documentation. All right, that is the third attachment. The fourth attachment that OPM put out is the thing you got to sign. What's it called here? Employee agreement. The employee agreement says that I understand that if the EPL fund is exhausted before my agency receives reimbursement from the fund for any use of EPL by me, the affected conditional EPL will be canceled and I will be responsible for eliminating the resulting leave debt. You got to sign and date that and submit that along with your request for EFEL. All right, so this all came out from OPM on April 29th. On April 30th, Doug Tolino followed up with another letter to all the employees of the Postal Service. And now that they had guidance from OPM, they put out a letter letting everyone know where they stood as of then. So in this letter, it tells us that to employees requesting EFEL must provide the following information. 3 things. 1 is the 3971, which you should have had already. You should have already completed the 3971. It should have already been approved conditionally for you being off work. Number 2 is the form that you're going to fill out, the employee notification and leave request form that came from OPM. I think the Postal Service maybe changed a couple of things to identify it as a Postal Service form, not a PS form, but coming from the Postal Service. But anyway, it's basically the same thing that came from OPM. And then number 3, once again, same thing that came from OPM, which is the agreement that you have to sign, 1, 2, and 3. So you have those 3 things. And then it says that all employees who were conditionally approved for EFEL leave under the Postal Service's interim policy, which started on March 11, 2021. This is dated April the 30th. Must complete an employee notification and leave request form, supply additional related documentation, and complete the employee agreement retroactively for the EFEL that was previously approved. Big, red flag here. Normally, you got a 3971 that's approved, in your whole postal career. What do we always know? If you have a 3971 that's approved, that's golden. In this case, if your 3971 was approved conditionally in between March 11th and April the 30th, you're still going to need to go back and provide the additional information and sign the forms in order for that leave to be approved. This information must be submitted to their respective supervisor within 10 days of receiving these forms. Failure to provide these completed signed forms will result in a denial of EFEL. Okay, very important that we understand that. So the Postal Service did or should have then sent out a letter to all postal employees who received EFEL payment under the 086-21 code that they were using initially to approve conditionally the leave under EFEL, they should have, everyone should have received this letter. Now, this letter, I can't guarantee that everyone got it. It's something that you should be aware of. It seems to indicate in this form that it was going to be sent out by postal headquarters. I don't think that's the case. I think it was supposed to be sent out locally by local supervisors and postmasters in their particular offices. So this is something we definitely want to check to see, to make sure that people, if you use DFEL, that you got this letter, and that if your coworkers and brothers and sisters used it, that they received this letter, because you have to respond to it. So it's giving you, it says that OPM issued guidance and the Postal Service is implementing that guidance, and you must comply with the instructions in this letter no later than Friday, May 21st, 2021, next Friday. And you must submit the following, and it's only going to give you the two things because the 3971 should already be on file, but it's letting you know you have to submit the form, and you have to submit the agreement that you have to sign, and then you have to submit any documentation that goes along with that. And then it says to submit all the EFEL documentation along with the forms to your direct supervisor or manager, and all forms must be received no later than Friday, May 21st, 2021. Now, if you recall, when OPM put out their guidance, they directed the agency to compile this information and provide it back to OPM, so OPM can reimburse the agency, the Postal Service, for all of the monies that are used to pay out this leave. Our concern is that the information that the forms and everything that you're filling out in the documentation is not going to be properly certified by the supervisor and submitted up the chain of command to OPM, in which case then they will try to come back and say that the leave is disapproved after the fact, and that's a concern. I have requested from the Postal Service, put in an official request for information for all of the names and carriers who have been certified by the Postal Service to OPM. And I'm going to be requesting that information starting on May the 22nd, the day after these documents are due, and every pay period thereafter, to make sure that we know that whose leave request was actually submitted to OPM and whose was not. And then if the Postal Service didn't do what they were supposed to do, your supervisor or whoever, we can initiate a grievance and try to get that addressed. Because what we don't want to happen is somebody to come back 2 months later and tell you, yeah, you know that leave you put in for back in April? Yeah, OPM never approved that. Now the funds have run out, and now you're just, SOL, and you can't get paid that leave, and you either leave without pay or have to substitute your leave. So we want to know in real time if it's been submitted or if there's an issue with your leave request. Additionally, union stewards, anybody can request that information locally from the local supervisors. I would highly encourage you guys to do that, to put those requests in so that we'll know what they're doing with our leave requests. Because once again, just because the 3971 was approved initially doesn't mean that it can't be, come back and disapproved at a later date. So the other document that the Postal Service put out was a stand-up talk. It was a pretty weak stand-up talk, in my opinion, dated May the 10th. In the stand-up talk, it's supposed to be giving information on emergency federal employee leave. I don't know if you guys got the stand-up talk or not, but one of the things they say in there is that the qualifying reasons include seeking a medical diagnosis when suffering from COVID-19 symptoms, quarantining or isolating under a medical provider's orders, and others. So they completely left out the whole thing about the schools being closed or e-learning. They completely left out the whole part about getting vaccinated under the EFEL or having symptoms as a result of the vaccination. The Postal Service, by the way, was advised by OPM. The advice that OPM gave was, instead of using this leave for people that want to get vaccinated or having side effects as a result of the vaccination, that they just allow for the employees to use admin leave instead, And that would keep the Postal Service from having to filling out all that paperwork, to keep you from having to filling out all that paperwork. The Postal Service has declined, at least up until now, to grant administrative leave for that purpose. So everyone will have to go through the process of filling out all these forms for EFEL just to go get vaccinated. Although it is paid leave under the law. So one thing about the other thing about the OPM's guidance on that was that the Postal Service would not have to fill out all the forms that relate to your retirement account if they just paid admin leave, because as the law indicated, the use of EFEL does not count toward creditable federal service when you go to calculate your retirement annuity under FERS. And the Postal Service, if you use 4 hours of EFEL, you have to fill out all the forms, but they also have to fill out their portion and certify that to OPM. And they also have to calculate accurately your retirement annuity estimate once you get to that point in your career, because of course you probably forgot about the 4 hours of EFEL or the 2 days or whatever that you used. But they'll be tasked with making that making that certification to OPM regarding how many hours were used and accurately providing you with an estimate on your retirement annuity. So we're working with the Postal Service on that and making sure that they're doing that. And hopefully we'll have that resolved prior to it becoming an issue for anybody. So that's just some information on the retirement piece. They give some examples in their 20-page attachment, OPM does, and go look at it. By the way, all of the forms that we're showing to you, you can go in the chat room and click on them if you want to print them out.
Not working. We're gonna email.
Oh, we're going to email.
That's not working.
How are we going to email them?
We're collecting their email addresses through chat.
We are. We're collecting your email addresses through chat as we speak, apparently. You should provide that email address if you can, please, so that we can email you all of the forms that we're alluding to here today. Google is also a wonderful thing. You can find out lots of things that way as well. But we want to provide you with the information. So if you put your email address in the chat, that would be helpful. The example that they give, talk about the hit on your retirement, it will still count. It's paid leave. So let's say you need 30 years to qualify for retirement. If part of that 30 years you got EFEL, you're still good because it's paid leave and it will still count as 30 years. What won't count is and the high 3 will count as well. So it's salary. So your high 3 salary would include the payments made under EFEL. So that wouldn't affect the FERS retirement. But what would affect is when they go to calculate your federal creditable service, it wouldn't count as 30 years. It would count as 29 years and blah, 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 whatever, deducting the amount that you took under EFEL, which would reduce your annuity amount. Now, it's not going to reduce it to the same amount as what's paid under EFEL, but nonetheless, it would reduce your retirement amount. So anyway, this thing I think is designed purposely this way to, discourage you from using this just indiscriminately. It's really a situation where you should use the leave as needed, but not use it if you don't have to. I think that's the best recommendation. Unfortunately, we never stopped working during the pandemic. When the pandemic started over a year ago, we've worked through the whole thing. We've been working a ton, providing great service to the American people. We never did get that hazard pay, but we did get this leave a little bit late in the game. Most of us really needed to probably be off work in 2020, not necessarily in 2021 with the vaccination program and a lot of the progress we've made. But a lot of us are still going through different circumstances, particularly with the vaccinations and particularly with the schooling situation, which is not totally resolved. And if you need to use the leave, that's what it's there for. We got it into the law, and it's there for a reason. So that pretty much concludes the presentation. The Postal Service additionally put out some Q&As, which fall under what they call FAQ, frequently asked questions. The Q&As we'll also provide to you. They are pretty good Q&As. They're good information. It falls under general information and eligibility, and then you have impacts of using EFEL, and then you have requesting EFEL. These are the different sections of the FAQ. And then number 4 is situational questions. And I have highlighted some questions and answers that I think will be relevant to people, but I think what we want to do now is hear from you guys. What questions do you have? It's open forum. This is a town hall meeting. So at this point, I think we'll open it up to people that have questions and situations that might require a response. So I don't know how we're going to do this, but do we have questions? If not, raise your hand or ask the questions.
There's a question from John Hudson. Is the leave still limited to 80-hour increments?
My brother, John Hudson, Ravenswood Station. All right, brother. The whole thing with the 80 hours was only in place during the conditional period. So because the Postal Service was waiting on guidance from OPM and they didn't know exactly when that guidance would come, it took over 6 weeks. It took forever. But during that time, they kept putting out those letters. And I mentioned they put out 4 different letters. Every time they put out a letter, they said, okay, we're only going to accept requests for EFEL in increments of 80 hours because we don't know if OPM is going to issue guidance. And as soon as they do, then, this letter is null and void, and the guidance will be will serve us as moving forward. So they put out 4 of those, 80 hours only, 80 hours only, 80 hours only. They kept putting an end date to it. But once the OPM put out guidance on April 29th, once the Postal Service put out their letter as response to the guidance on April the 30th, that 80-hour restriction was eliminated.
Mike, so how much could you ask for at one time then?
Now you can ask for,
Repeat the question.
how much can you ask for at one time? It's obviously it's up to 600 hours, and it depends on how much you have used already. But if you know the circumstances, so there's documentation required for whatever it is. So for instance, if you're advised to quarantine by a doctor, right? Well, what is the length of the quarantine? You would request the length of the quarantine. If you're talking about a school issue, same thing. If you know the school is not going to open back up this year and the last day of school is May 29th, then you'd put your request in from now until May 29th for the days when you're scheduled to work that school is not in session. So you're not requesting any EFEL on an NS day, and you're not requesting any EFEL on a Saturday when the school's not in session, unless you have another reason for requesting that leave on a Saturday. That would be a separate 3971 that would be unrelated to the school situation.
Have they been requesting that, have management been requesting that separate 71?
Sometimes yes, and sometimes no. The question was, has management been requesting that you fill out a separate 3971? Most people that I know are coming to work on Saturday. The whole situation with the school, before the pandemic, you had to make arrangements on a Saturday. We all do and all did and make arrangements. So a lot of people are coming to work on Saturday. If you're not coming, I would definitely recommend a separate 3971, because it's you're going to fill out all those forms with the qualifying reason and all that, and the documents that go along with the form. And it's just, it's just different. It's not the same thing as the school is closed or my kid is on e-learning. Now you have to show that the normal daycare provider is not available to you for COVID related reasons. You have to identify who that person is, and there's requirements in that. So by the way, if you're going to fill out all of the documents, and maybe Ronnie will send this to you, I don't know, but Ronnie Morgan has designed an excellent form for the brothers and sisters in Branch 11 If you're gonna fill out, you have to fill out the 3 documents, the 3971, the form, and then the authorization, you sign away. It's up on the screen now. He's made all that into a form fill, a document where, for example, once you put your name in, the name will populate on the form that you have to submit along with the 3971. And there's some other kind of cool things in there. So that's pretty cool. Once you click, see the name popped up, and then once you click the reason why, the reason why will pop up and populate in the different fields. So kudos to Brother Morgan for designing this for the brothers and sisters here in Branch 11. I'm sure if you ask him for it, he'll make it available to you guys outside of the branch as well. Thor had to be off work, man. Oh, that's your kid's name? Your kid's name is Thor?
Yeah.
So yeah, once he populated Thor's name, if you go down and see, it will populate in the appropriate field under number 5 under the documentation field. How come it didn't populate the school, Ronnie? I thought you put the school up in there too, right? Asgard, what's that? Oh, it might be a quirk in the form. We'll have to get that fixed. Have to get the 2.0 version. Okay, so someone just asked what documentation is going to be required for the school, and we happen to be on that screen, so we can look at it. So under number 5, what you're going to be required to provide to them is the name of the school, place of care or child care provider, and a brief description of the situation. So you name the school and then you say, is it closed? Are they doing online instruction? Are they doing, whatever, comma, unavailability of child care provider. So you put that information in there, and then you have to provide a written explanation regarding why the circumstance, e.g. the ages of the children, the number of the children, the special needs, lack of other adults in the home, why the circumstance make the employee unable to work during the requested hours of leave. I can't leave my kid alone. He's 8 years old, whatever, that kind of thing. And that's it under number 5. I'm missing anything, Ronnie? No. Okay. He said no off mic, so that's good. If I get confirmation from Brother Morgan, I know I'm good to go. All right. What other questions we have?
Carol Sparks has her hand up.
Can you call on her?
Yep.
Go ahead, Carol.
So they said during school hours. So are we required to work during the non-school hours? Like if they go to school from 8 to 2:30, are we required to come in from 7:30 or after 2:30?
Possibly. It's obviously there's got to be travel time and stuff like that included in there. In the frequently asked questions, there's a part in there that under section 4, number 8. Go down to number 8, Ronnie. And it kind of alludes to this. The question is, I work a tour that does not directly, well, this is kind of something separate, but we'll go here first. I work a tour that does not directly conflict with my child's hours of virtual or hybrid schooling, or my need to provide childcare as a result of the childcare provider's inability. Am I still eligible for EFEL under qualifying reason number 5? And that's no. So in other words, let's say you work the night shift, but you wanted
Right.
to rest at night so that you could be available for e-learning during the day. That wouldn't work. However, then it says supervisors may not require an employee with a normal schedule to work a different schedule or tour in order to avoid the need for employees to use EFEL. So in your scenario, it depends on what your work schedule is. If your work schedule is from like 8 to 4 and the schooling schedule is 7:30 to 3:30, then no, you're not available anytime therein. But if you are available for any portion of that work schedule, then you should be at work during that portion where you are available, where, you know, the schooling is not preventing you from being there. But the other thing is you could voluntarily, the supervisor cannot require you. However, you could voluntarily, because maybe you don't want to use up all 600 hours of the leave,
Right.
or because of the hit on your retirement, or because, you know, you need to get out of the house because them damn kids are driving you crazy. You could revise your schedule and say, hey, I'll come into work, you know, from 12 to 8, you know, for, as an example, is getting lighter out there, more hours. You could work from 12 to 8 and take the, now that wouldn't, you would still take the EFEL. I guess it wouldn't be 12 to 8, but let's say you would work 4 to 8, and then you would take EFEL from 12 to 4. I think that's what it is.
Okay,
You revise your schedule, you know, in that example.
okay, sounds good.
All right, thank you.
Dennis has his hand.
Go ahead.
My question is related to her question. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you, brother. Go ahead.
Yeah, okay. So, in other words, let's say I had to watch my kids around till 12 o'clock. I can work at 1 o'clock to 4 o'clock, right?
Correct.
But anything after 4 o'clock should be overtime. Is it work like that?
Yeah, it should be overtime unless you voluntarily agree to change your schedule. They could not obligate you to change your schedule. You could if you wanted to, but if you don't voluntarily change your schedule on the PS Form 3189, then it would be overtime, correct?
So let's say I had a EFPL leave request from 7 to 4 o'clock.
Right.
And I want to work another 4 hours. That should be overtime, right? And if
That's
I'm
correct.
on the overtime, Desiree?
That's correct, because the EFEL replaces any type of leave that you would use. It would be treated similarly as if you were, say, on annual leave for 8 hours and then worked 4 hours. The 4 hours that you work would be at the overtime rate. That's correct.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Good question. And I know they need people, so come on. Get in there and work that overtime. Even if you're not available during the day, you might be available later on in the day or on the weekends or whatever. I don't think they'll turn you away. They shouldn't. What other questions? Should we go over some of the questions in the frequently asked questions? All right, let's do it. All right, you want to go back to the beginning, Ronnie? I guess I didn't highlight anything under, oh, we did highlight question or number 15 there. Yeah, we highlighted that. You already got it highlighted there. Number 15 under section 1 of the frequently asked questions. Does any healthcare provider count for qualifying reasons 2 and 4? Keep in mind, number 4 doesn't really require any documentation anyway, unless there's some special need for some type of documentation. But anyway, under number 2, the answer is no. With limited exceptions, the healthcare provider must be a doctor. Supervisors should contact the district human resources and or law department if they're not sure an employee's healthcare provider qualifies. Another reason why I want to know that they've certified your request to OPM, because that means they approved of the documentation that you submitted. I don't want to run into a circumstance, or you don't want to have a circumstance where you submit some documentation that you think is acceptable, come to find out it wasn't, and then later on they never submitted it to OPM, and then the fund runs out, and then they're asking you to repay that money. So anyway, so keep that in mind. If you're providing documentation, it should be from a doctor. Under number 3, which is requesting EFEL, it talks about the form 3971. How do I request EFEL? And you got to do the 3 things, but under the 3971, it kind of guides you on how to fill it out. You would submit it, and under the comments section, you check other, and then you would write EFEL, and then just number 1 through 8 in the comments section. A real simple way to fill out the 3971. All the other information is already provided on those forms, which you're going to have to submit along with the 3971. So I thought that was helpful. Go ahead. We'll take the question. You want to call on them? Just call on them so they'll know who they are. Oh. Amarillo Falcon. Falcon.
Hi, no, I didn't have an question. Sorry.
Go ahead.
No, I didn't have a question. Sorry.
Oh, you inadvertently raised your hand. Got you.
Sorry.
You must be new to this Zoom thing. We understand.
Yeah.
No, it's all good. All right, back to the frequently asked questions. Torre, what you got?
I'm good evening.
Good evening.
My question is, if you have a child that's going to get vaccinated, do any of these qualifying reasons apply to that?
No.
No. Okay.
No, and unless you qualify under number 4, and you have to take care of the child for some reason. You're taking care of the child for a reason of under number 2 and number 3. Number 2 is, the child is advised to self-quarantine, or number 3, as you're caring, I'm sorry, no, number 3, you're caring for the individual who was required to self-quarantine. But the vaccination, clearly, I think there's one of the questions on that in the frequently asked questions, but no, you don't qualify for leave under the EFEL to take somebody else to get the vaccination. Only if they're required to quarantine, you would qualify.
Okay. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. All right, we're going back to number 4. No. Yeah, is that number 4? No, that's not number 4. Oh, we're going back to question number, it's under section 3, Ronnie. Look at number 2. So number 2 under section 3 of the frequently asked questions says what additional documentation is generally required for each qualifying reason. And I wanted to point this out to you guys. So number 4, which is experiencing COVID-19 symptoms and seeking a medical diagnosis, the answer is none. No other documentation is required. Number 8, immunization or recovering from an injury, illness, or condition related to the immunization, documentation required, none, okay? Then it goes on to say, the EFEL employee notification and leave request form on which employees will supply this information requires employees to certify to the truth of their statements in requesting EFEL. Providing false information may be grounds for disciplinary action up to and including removal. In addition to those documentation requirements, the Postal Service may require additional information, explanations, or certifications from an employee if they have a reasonable basis to believe that EFEL is not being used appropriately. Supervisors are required to consult with Labor Relations and/or the Law Department prior to requesting such additional information. If you get into a situation where there's a dispute about what you have provided already, and if you think it's sufficient, and they don't think it's sufficient, that kind of thing, you're not comfortable providing them with more information, or you've provided them with sufficient information under the law, and they're still requiring more, you need to contact the union so that we can intervene and try to get that resolved as soon as possible and not let that dispute linger out there. So if you're in branch 11, contact Ronnie Morgan. Outside of branch 11, call the regional office of the NALC so we can assist you with that, okay? Number 4, under the same section, can you call the call-off line to request leave under the EFEL? No, you cannot. To request EFEL, you must submit a request to your supervisor or manager along with the 3 things, the 3971, the form, and the thing you have to sign. May I use EFEL intermittently? This was a problem during the FFCRA of 2020. It's clarified that it's not an issue. You can use it intermittently. You can also use it if you have multiple issues. Like I referred to, you could have the school closed Monday through Friday, a lack of childcare due to COVID-related reasons on Saturday. That's two separate things. You could have developed symptoms. You could be seeking diagnosis. You could be told to quarantine, whatever. All of those could be separate things. Each one will require its separate request. By the way, the form, the third one the employee release form, the one that you sign acknowledging that the leave is being approved conditionally, that only has to be submitted one time. Every time thereafter, there's a separate request for EFEL. You have to provide the 3971 3971 along with the other forms. But that third document, once you sign it the first time, it should be in the file. And by the way, the Postal Service is supposed to keep a file for each employee that requests EFEL up to 4 years, and it's supposed to be, something that they can refer back to, documentation in case there's any issues that come up later. If there's medical documentation, that should be forwarded and sent to the appropriate medical officials within the Postal Service. Reason 7 requires documentation. It's in the form. If you go back and look at the form, what documentation would be required, it's under the frequently asked questions as well. Under number 7, it says caring for a family member with a mental or physical disability or who is 55 years of age or older and incapable of self-care without regard to whether another individual is available to care for such family member if the place of care for such family member is closed or the direct care provider is unavailable due to COVID-19. So what you'd have to provide is the name of the family member that is applicable, the name and the age, either the name of the family member with a mental or physical disability or the name and age of the family member that is 55 years old or older. Also the name of place of care that is closed or the direct care provider that's unavailable due to COVID-19, and a written explanation regarding why your care responsibilities make you unable to work. It does not require you to say that there's nobody else available. That's a distinction in the law there. But it does require you to say that your care would make you unable to work.
Couple of questions in the chat.
All right, you gonna ask the questions or are they gonna unmute?
And make sure that there's no echo.
Echo. There's an echo.
All right, then.
What do I got to do? Read the chat?
If a member submits all required paperwork and documentation and they still deny the 3971, just come up here. All right, question from the chat.
You don't want to read it? If a member submits all required paperwork and documentation, management still denies the 3971, is it still in effect and EFEL leave can be taken? That was from Ms. Falcon, who said she didn't have a question, so she does, which is great. Well, if we have a dispute, someone mentioned here in the hall here, file a grievance, but we really want to get those disputes resolved. So prior to April the 30th, they were just approving all the 3971s conditionally. So you didn't really know if it was actually going to be approved and submitted to OPM. But moving forward, when you submit those requests in real time, the 3971 is submitted with all the documentation that you need along with the forms. It should be responded to by the supervisor. So if it's inappropriately disapproved, normally we would just file a grievance, that kind of thing. But in this case, because we don't want the funds to run out, OPM's funds, we want to make sure that it gets approved immediately and processed immediately. Get that information to us. either at the regional office or if you're in branch 11, here to Ronnie Morgan, so we can try to get that dispute resolved immediately, okay?
Next question.
Tony Botnick? Tony B, what if the child gets sick from the shot and you need to take off to care for them? If the child gets sick, I don't think so. If the child gets sick, I think that's, sick leave for dependent care. If the child is told to quarantine, or if the child can't go to school, then you would qualify. They're gonna allow teens to get the shot. Yeah, I don't think, once again, there is no, and I saw one of the questions on it. I can't find it like right now in real time, but there was a question on that about people that, had to take a minor child to get the shot or whatever. That doesn't qualify under one of the conditions for EFEL. So it just has to be one of the conditions. If it's not, then it's not. All right. Situational questions, number 4, section 4 of the frequently asked questions. I thought number 2 was a good question. Number 2 says that which qualifying reason should I use for EFEL after I have tested positive for COVID-19? What you would actually use is reason number 2 if you're told to quarantine by a medical provider. But keep in mind, they said they want a doctor, right? So if you were told by a doctor to quarantine as a result of a positive test, then you could use number 2. If you have tested positive for COVID-19 but have been ordered to isolate, then you could use, if you have tested positive for COVID-19 but have not been ordered to isolate or quarantine by a healthcare provider, then you should use qualifying reason number 1 if you fall under the CDC's isolation guidelines. And then they list what the guidelines are as of April the 27th, but as those are updated, you would just follow those guidelines, and then you would submit under number 1, and you say, per the CDC guidelines, that's a federal order that's telling you to quarantine and not come to work. So you would still qualify under that. Number 4, we got a question. Dionisio, go ahead, brother. Another inadvertent hand raised? No? Go ahead, Shirley.
One of the areas that the job asked, was they gonna be really made to pay this week back? Management, they're gonna get the document in time or whatever happened when they gave them and approved the 71, pretty much like what you said. Will they be made to pay this leave back when they didn't tell them this before they granted them the leave?
Well, if they didn't tell them this prior to granting the leave, they should have. It was in the letters and the stand-up talk and the guidance that the Postal Service put out that these leave approvals were conditional, waiting on guidance from OPM. The guidance from OPM is pretty clear on what is required for the agency to be able to pay out this leave and request reimbursement from OPM. So I think yes. I think the answer is they're not going to pay the person that doesn't take the additional steps to fill out the forms and things like that, even though their 3971 was already approved conditionally. So I would tell your coworker they need to get on that. They need to fill out the forms. Yeah, they will, just like any other leave request, that is approved and then later disapproved. And then, you either got to substitute it for some other type of leave or you have to pay it back. Yeah, that's going to be a situation. Now, on that refers to a request that's disapproved because you didn't provide certain documentation or whatever. The other concern is disapproval based on the fund running out. 2 things.
People on Zoom can't hear Shirley.
Yeah, they can't hear you, Shirley.
Okay, they paid them the money already, so they paid them leave already, and now later they're going back and asking for documentation, and they're saying, if I don't get all these documentation, will I be made to pay this money back?
Yeah, that's what I was saying. That was the whole first answer I gave you. I was just adding to, it wasn't based on your question. I was saying there's a second circumstance where a person's leave could be conditionally approved and then later disapproved. The first one was if their documentation, they don't submit the right forms, documentation, etc. The second reason is if the fund runs out. So the post office will conditionally approve your leave, but it's all based on there being money in the fund, the $570 million still being available. So a couple things on that. One, OPM has put up a tracker, a link that you can click on. And so far, nobody has deducted any money because the agencies are still submitting the forms. So it's still at $570 million, even though some of the money has been used on administrative costs, but it's still at a high amount. But once the agencies, the various federal agencies start using that money, we'll be able to see how much of the fund has been used and if it's going down to the point where your request may not be approved or may not be paid, I guess would be the way to look at it. We do not anticipate, we know that when they wrote the law, they anticipated that $570 million appropriation would be sufficient to cover the costs for this leave. But if it turns out that that's wrong and it's not enough money, then we'll be able to monitor that by looking at the fund balance that's available to everybody.
Will the carriers be able to see that and track that, or do we?
Everyone can track it. Hell, we can put the link into the chat room. There's a link that you opm.gov/blah blah blah, that you can click on. We'll provide that to you. That like I said, there's been no activity on that link yet because for example, the Postal Service is not going to submit anything at least until May 22nd because they're giving all the employees time to submit the forms up until May 21st. So the other agencies, we don't know what they're doing, but once they start submitting that stuff, then we'll see what that balance looks like.
Dennis still had his hand up.
Dionisio, go ahead, brother.
Okay, my question is, the scenario is an employee is going to go on procedure. However, before the procedure, the doctor ordered him to do 3-day quarantine and swab testing for COVID-19.
Yep.
How is that going to, which qualifying reason should he use?
The 3 days or whatever that time frame is that you're ordered by the doctor to quarantine, that would qualify under the EFEL number 2, I guess, right? Would be the qualifying reason. Is that right, Ronnie?
Yeah.
Ronnie says yes. Qualifying reason number 2. The time for the surgery or recuperation from the surgery, all of that obviously falls under sick leave, but the time that you have to quarantine prior to the surgery based on the doctor's orders, that would be qualifying reason number 2 under the EFEL.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. There is some questions in the chat. And let me see if I can figure out how to do this here. Starting with Gene. It's, is that the one that's in, no? It's not letting me, hold on, y'all. Okay, I got it, sorry. An employee calls in because they were told to quarantine because of close contact. They chose not to get the rapid test. Will they be required to provide documentation from a medical provider under number 2? Okay, Gene, there's a scenario here that the testing part is not going to matter. The part that's going to matter is were they required to quarantine by a medical provider or per the law. And if they were, then they would qualify under reason number 2 again. If they were as a result of close contact tracing by the Postal Service, however, then it should be admin leave. And question number 4 under the situational questions is if you're identified as someone exposed to COVID-19 through the Postal Service's contact tracing program in order to quarantine, do I qualify for EFEL? And the answer is if you are quarantined by the Postal Service, then you will not use EFEL solely for the Postal Service issued quarantine, and the appropriate hours code for that is 086-10. 086-10 is an admin leave code, if you're told to quarantine by the Postal Service's contact tracing program. All right, next question, Brian. Still not working. Brian from Belleville. All right, what if you're caring for a spouse who has been diagnosed with cancer that is spreading and now has a compromised immune system? Man, this is a cheerful question. Making it deadly to go anywhere except the hospital. Would number 7 cover that? Number 7, you'd be, I think number 3 would. Well, it may be number 3 because number 3 is if you have to care for that person who's been quarantined. Number 7, if that person is disabled or over the age of 55. So yeah, maybe number 7 or number 3. I think that it depends the reason that they're if they're quarantined as a result of COVID, or if they're just incapacitated as a result of their illness, so the documentation that you provide would distinguish the two and know if you qualify or not. Ronnie, what are your thoughts on
I
that?
think it'll be very difficult to qualify.
Ronnie says very difficult to qualify under this scenario. There is a qualifying condition when you have to care for the person.
Yeah, but you have to care for a person. It have to be that there's an impact. So like say if you're caring for a person,
You could take your mask off. We've been vaccinated.
if under number 7, when you're caring for a person that's either disabled or that are incapable of self-care because of their age, it has to be that they had a care provider before that's no longer available because of COVID-19, or if the place that they were going to that provided care was no longer available because of COVID-19 precautions. I don't think that something kind of developing that's new would automatically qualify you under number 7. I think it's a stretch.
Fair answer. Fair answer. Fair answer. All right. Next question. Brother says he understands. Okay, if you test positive for COVID, how would you submit your documentation if you have to quarantine? That is an excellent question.
I tell them how we do it here.
All right, Ronnie's going to tell you how they do it here in Branch 11, and we'll see if that's applicable or if we need to add something to that.
Okay, so for Branch 11, we have trust issues with our management and units.
What?
So we don't like to give the documentation to them. What we've been asking our members to do, ask our union stewards to inform our members, is to let us know here, let me know here. And their privacy is protected, of course. And I have contacts directly with the occupational health nurse, the ONA. So you get your medical documentation in to me, then I send it directly to the ONA, which should then contact the employee, do contact tracing. And at the same time, I do the leave request for them too, since they can't enter the facility. And we do all that electronically, and it works out pretty well. If they picked up the virus in the workplace, we talk about getting them in e-comp and seeing about a claim. So we encourage those people who've tested positive in Branch 11 to contact me here so we can take care of them and get them in the right place.
And to add to that is just that if, obviously if you're told to quarantine or, you have the virus and you should not enter the workplace, you try to provide that information via US mail, email, send it with a coworker, that kind of thing, or upon your return to work. Although, try to expedite that as soon as you can. So maybe if you contact your local branch, they could assist with that as well, like they do here in Branch 11. There's a question about it qualifying for OWCP, it's kind of off subject a little bit, but if there's now a presumptive positive, a presumptive default that if you got the virus and you're a letter carrier, that if you don't know where you got the virus from, it's going to be assumed that you got it at work and you should file a claim with OWCP. And we can assist you guys with that if you need to file a claim. If you know where you got it, then that's different. But because of our occupation, the default is we assume that we got it at work somehow if we don't know how we got it, other way. So if you did test positive for the virus, you may want to file a claim with OWCP. Any other questions?
I know you said that they weren't going to submit the paperwork till May 22nd, but what about after that? Do they have a set time that they have to submit that, or can they just?
Yeah, the question is about the Postal Service submitting paperwork to OPM and the time frame. Under the guidelines that OPM has for the agency, I'm going off the top of my head here, but it basically says that they should submit that at regular intervals, depending on the pay. Basically, for the Postal Service, every pay period, that there's a period of time that would work, that would be a regular interval. I think that the Postal Service will use every pay period. When I put my request into the Postal Service to provide me with the list of what they provided to OPM, I asked them for it every pay period or at whatever regular interval they're submitting that information to OPM. I assume it'll be every pay period, but we don't know that for sure. All right, thank you. I'm trying to see if there's anything else under the facts, the frequently asked questions. So number 10, I thought was interesting. And we're getting this a lot with people that are getting vaccinated. And it clarifies in there, the question is, how many hours of EFEL can I take? And can I request EFEL for the anticipated side effects? For your vaccination appointment itself, you may take only the minimal amount of EFEL necessary to cover the time spent getting the vaccination, including the 20 minutes that you got to sit there, including necessary travel time. And then it says you may not request EFEL in advance for anticipated adverse reactions to COVID-19 vaccine, because you would be unable to truthfully attest that you are unable to work as a result of side effects that you have not yet experienced. Keep in mind, you're going to be signing forms and attesting to and swearing and all that good stuff. So you would have to submit that separately, once for the vaccine and then once again for the for the side effects of the vaccine, if you have any. You don't know that. That's all I had under the frequently asked questions. Ronnie, you had other stuff you wanted to talk about?
Well, yeah, about the school question that keeps coming up. Well, they just want to make sure that everybody that wants a copy of this presentation is emailing me or Tony so we can send it out. It'll have everything that we've gone over here today. And then there was this question here about the virtual learning, being that at this point in time, it's optional in a lot of places. And if you opt not to send your child to in-person learning, you would still qualify. And that's something in these questions and answers that you should know about. So it's not that like before, if you opted out, you're on your own. Not anymore for this case.
All right. Shirley, live and in person. I said live and in person. Go ahead. They can't hear you though, so I'm gonna have to repeat it.
Management sent a person home who had been off work for 4 months due to testing positive for COVID and other issues that went on, serious issues that went on with the COVID. And the person went back to work. And then management sent them back home after they went to work for 2 weeks stating that they want some other documentation to clear them to come to work. Would that be under
yeah.
administrative or?
Our position is anytime the postal service tells you you can't work, it's always admin leave. So if they, and, you know, if you can't work due to whatever, then it's either sick leave or EFEL or whatever. But if the postal service is telling you you can't work, your employer, we're gonna always request admin leave in those situations. They don't have to pay admin leave. They just let the employee work. You know, that solves that problem. Yeah. All right, we ran over a little bit on time. Hope it was informative. We're getting late into the night. I know you guys got to be up early, although we don't start as early in the morning as we once did. But I really thank everyone for their participation. Thank Brother Morgan for everything. The man is awesome. Really appreciate everything he does for me and for everybody else here. And everyone have a great night. Thank you for your time and good luck out there, brothers and sisters. Stay safe. That was fun.
Good job.
Oh, you still there?
Yeah. Actually went real good.
Do we record that?
Yep, looks like it's still recording.
Still recording? Well, we can edit this part out.
So that'll be like a 3,000 gigabyte size file.